You're listening to the Speaking Tongues podcast. I'm your host, Elle Charisse. Each week, I sit down to a conversation with multilinguals where we discuss and celebrate language, life, and culture through our own perspectives. Episode 66, Speaking Haitian Creole. Hello, language lovers. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Speaking Tongues, the podcast in conversation with multilinguals. This week, I'm so excited to speak with Valentino about his language of Haitian Creole. He is a self-taught polyglot and speaks several languages in addition to his native Creole language. In this episode, Valentino tells us how both Creole and French are used in Haiti and where you would be likely to hear one over the other. We talk about things that make Creole unique and, rather importantly, why it's not broken French. Valentino tells us about the phonological and grammatical nature of the language and how it has been influenced by languages from Africa. He tells us about the linguistic variations of Creole spoken in Port-au-Prince versus in other regions of the country, and how the Creole spoken in the capital has influences from English, Spanish, and French as well. We also talk about intelligibility between French-derived Caribbean Creoles, and we learn about how unique Haitian culture is in the region from a historical standpoint. Big thank you to Valentino for joining me from outside the Brazilian embassy in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, for this episode, and for sharing bits of your culture and language journey with us. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Speaking Tongues podcast on Apple Podcasts, or like and subscribe on YouTube so that other language lovers like ourselves can find the show. And if you've been a longtime listener of the show or even a recent listener, you can now support the show on buymeacoffee.com. Links to all platforms are in the show notes. Okay, let's chat. Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I'm here today with Valentino. How are you today, Valentino?
I'm great. Thank you. What about yourself?
I'm fantastic, and I'm so glad that I have an opportunity to talk to you. I know we've been trying to get this together for a while, so it's finally coming together. I'm so excited.
So am I. So am I.
I like to start each episode with the same question, and that is, what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
Okay. My first language, the language that I speak in Haiti, which is the vernacular tongue of Haiti, is Haitian Creole. But in Haiti, there are two official languages. We have French, which is the second language or foreign language, and then Haitian Creole. But the Haitian Creole is my first language. Some other languages that I speak, there are English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian. Recently, I've been learning German. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can say that I have an A1 level, just elementary level, just started learning. And I definitely would like to learn um, Chinese and Russian.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. So
Yeah.
what languages did you hear spoken in your home and in your community when you were growing up?
So when I was growing up, I grew up listening to a lot of folks in my community speaking Haitian Creole,
Mm.
and I went to community school where I had my first I had the opportunity to learn English with a bunch of kids there and French.
Is French taught in schools in Haiti?
Yeah, yes. In Haiti, French is taught, but not as a foreign language. It's kind of chaotic in Haiti the way French is we are operating in a French language. The French language is it's 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 not fully a second language, neither a foreign language. So
Mm.
in Haiti, in schools, we use French as the language, the intellectual language, the scholar language to which books are translated, conferences are made, and other intellectual stuff are done in French. But French is not the language that most Haitian people speak, and it's not spoken in the street. So you can see that when you go to the library, you go to school, to university, is French is spoken there. But
Mm.
normally in the street, it's very rare to find people speaking French in the street. It's not natural.
Right. Right. So French is the language of instruction in school.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Oh, I see.
Although that in Haitian Creole, we're trying to, there's a Haitian Creole Academy in Haiti,
Mhm.
founded in 2014. There's a headquarters in a place called Delma in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. So Haitian Creole is, it's kind of expanding right now. A lot of Haitians feel very proud using Haitian Creole talking. And then Haitian Creole, there are a lot of artists, a lot of writers, philosophers, poets. They're using the language in order to transmit their thoughts, passion, etc. Which was in the past, it was banned to use Haitian Creole. It was not that interesting, that academic to use Haitian Creole to transmit, very interesting things. But
Mm.
now we're starting to use Haitian Creole, very we're trying to integrate our culture deeply now.
Right. Right. That must be exciting.
Yeah, yeah. As a student of linguistics, I'm very interested in Haitian Creole, and I definitely want to do my specialize in Haitian Creole as well later. Just have
Mhm.
a PhD or master's degree in Haitian Creole. I think that Haitian Creole is one of the most, I would say, it's very very easy to learn Haitian Creole due to the flexibility of the language, the the grammatical structures and the sound system, because it has a French part of it and some African dialect of it.
Mhm.
It's a mixture. Like
Yeah.
when you say, yeah, when you say Creole, like there's Haitian Creole, there are Louisianian Creole, there are a lot of Creoles in the world. But according to a lot of scientists, they think that Haitian Creole is the most famous Creole in the world because spoken by over 12 million people in Haiti and
Yeah.
a lot of other million people abroad. Like we have more than 5 million people living abroad. So
Mhm.
Haitian Creole is very, very, it's expanding right now. So I'm very happy and very excited about this language.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, you said that French is not taught in school as a second language. Are do
French
H-
is not,
it's
sorry.
not Haitian schools teach a second language? And if they do, what is
Mhm.
that second language?
Yeah. The way French is in Haiti is that we teach it's like French in Haiti. We pretend that French is our second language, but in reality, it's not exactly a second language because it's not fully integrated by most Haitian people. 95% percent of people in Haiti speak Haitian Creole. 5%
Mm.
of Haitian people speak French. That can I would say that can operate in language as a native speaker. I would say it's around 5%. So French is not taught as a second language, nor as a foreign language. We just operate in French in a way that we would pick it up naturally.
Mhm.
That is one of the biggest problems that we have in our educational system because the language that we use is not fully integrated by all Haitian students, folks, people who go to school, and yet we are using it as the linguistic code of our instruction. So
Mm.
I think French, the way French is taught, is normally as in France. Like when you go to France, you supposed to speak the language, and then they're not going to teach you vocabulary words. They're not going to teach you the structure. Um, they're just gonna pretend that you know. They're just gonna assume that you
Mm.
know the language, and then they're just gonna start teaching you the language that way. And from the very beginning, they're gonna give you a bunch of grammar books to cram to master to know all the rules of the French language, and which is not really it's not good. It's not really good the way that we teach in Haiti. We don't know because a lot of scientists they believe that French it's very the status of French language in Haiti is kind of mysterious because a lot of people are writing about it, and we're still pending to see exactly the official status in Haiti.
Mhm.
Nevertheless, in our legal, like the legal system of Haiti, the constitution, you would see that there are two official languages in Haiti, French and Haitian Creole, and the language by which that is bound all the Haitian folks is Haitian Creole.
What was your experience like learning languages in school?
Yeah. In Haiti, they teach you two foreign languages. They teach you very badly. I suppose as in most countries because they don't do well. English and Spanish.
Okay.
When I was growing up, I started learning English at school. Then I went to a place, a hospital. It was an American hospital called PID. Still, I think it exists still. I used
Mhm.
to go to that place like three times, four times a week. There was an American nurse there, was my friend. She was a nurse, and she taught me English. I came along with a book, an English book, for called English for Changing the World. It's a very
Mhm.
very archaic book, and I went there from book one to book five, and she taught me. Not she was not a teacher, but she taught me the pronunciation of the language and the sounds and everything. And I started learning English. I was maybe 12, 13 at that time. Yeah, around the 2010,
Mhm.
after right after the earthquake of Haiti. I was in ninth grade at the time, and I started learning English, and ever since I keep learning new vocabulary words and trying to find a lot of people, online and practice my English. And I remember I went to university and I get into um, a school called normal school. I don't know how to say that in English. I think it's upper normal school in English, which is in French, École normale supérieure, where they
Mhm.
they teach you to be a professional teacher. I spent 4 years there, and I'm still working on my thesis, my dissertation,
Mhm.
and I learned, I just wanted to be a teacher of foreign languages, and they taught me for 4 years there. And then this is where I expand my knowledge when it comes to literature and history of the United States of America and the language, the grammatical structure in a very systematic way. So my relationship with English has been so close that I even have more books in Haitian in English in my house than Haitian Creole, even than French in my house. Yeah.
Do you feel like that's typical, like, as you mentioned the relationship that Haitians have with the French language and the
Hmm.
Creole, do you feel like many Haitian people have a better relationship to other languages, like English, for example, than they do to French when it comes to seeking out things like literature or music or art or anything like that?
Yeah, yeah. That's a wonderful question, and I think one of the things that there's still, Haiti was colonized by France, and we still have um, this mindset in our community that Haitian people, they have a tendency to the French language, which is kind of elite. The French language is the language used by academic
Mm,
people that are from the bourgeoisie, people that have opportunities, economical and intellectual and other opportunities. So the French language is kind of mysterious because most of Haitian, they say 95 people speak Haitian Creole and 5% of others they speak Haitian Creole. But it's very rare for somebody not to understand Haitian Creole, French. Sorry.
mhm.
I think that they kind of afraid. Not most of them, but some of them they kind of afraid to um to speak French because whenever you speak French in Haiti, you make mistake. People are gonna mark you. They're just gonna laugh at you.
Mm,
Because the French language is so, it's not difficult, but there are a lot of variables that you have in Haitian Creole, you don't have in French, and then the country in Haitian Creole in the French language. So it's whenever you speak French in Haiti, you have to take your time and you have to be very because people are not going to forgive you if you make a mistake, especially grammatical mistake in French.
mm.
Yeah. that's one of the thing I believe that, you know, that keeps one of the things that keeps the Haitian folks from, diving into the French culture, literature, and the language, because they are afraid of making mistakes. And one of the greatest impediments to fully master language is not to make mistakes, being
Right.
afraid of making mistakes. So a lot of Haitian folks, they understand the language, they have the capacity, but they can't perform because they don't have the sufficient output of the language.
Hmm.
You know?
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
No, that's really really interesting, and I'm interested in that because
Hmm.
oh, I don't have like the words to say it right now, but I guess I'm trying to say like it's kind of like Haitian people are, surrounded by this language, but there's no everyday opportunity to learn it. And I would imagine
Yeah.
if you are out of school, if you're someone who has completed school already,
Hmm.
and you're going about your life and you're speaking in Creole every day, you
Hmm.
don't have that French muscle to keep it active, so
Hmm.
you don't really use it. And that's just something about like that's a whole different conversation about colonialism, right? And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that kind of mentality of, I think a lot of us around the world are breaking free from that mentality of like,
Hmm.
what the colonial powers wanted us
Hmm.
to do
Hmm.
is not the right way, is not the only way anymore
Hmm.
to do
Hmm.
things.
Hmm.
So
Yes.
that,
Mhm.
yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious to know the other languages that you speak. How did you come to learning those, and why did you choose those to learn?
Yeah. I started learning Spanish in 2016. Yeah, in 2016 when I was in the university. I wanted to be an English teacher only. And when I went to the university, I saw that there was it's a state university where you're not paying anything. You get everything for free. So I saw that there was an opportunity to learn Spanish. So I took some Spanish classes, and then I saw that Spanish was very interesting, and I really enjoyed it. And I said, oh, okay, let me just give it a try then. And I started learning Spanish. From the very first year, at the end of the year, I think in December, I went to an institute which is called Centro Cultural Brasil Haiti, which is the Brazilian embassy in Haiti. They
Mm,
have Portuguese classes, and
cool.
I said, okay, once I speak Spanish, so let's dive into the Portuguese language. And then I spent 2 years. Yeah, I spent 2 years there from 2002 there, 2016, 2018, and I have a C1 in C1 level, which is the advanced advanced level in Portuguese, in Brazilian Portuguese language and
Mhm.
culture. I think my Portuguese is stronger than my Spanish because Spanish I read more in Spanish, but I don't really practice Spanish.
Mm,
But Brazilian Portuguese, I can have colloquial conversation with people, but sometimes kind of hard for me in Spanish because I don't really I know more academic stuff, read literature and stories in Spanish, but I don't really practice. I practice sometimes with a friend of mine whose name is Josue, who's
mm.
a Mexican. But I'm talking about, you know, how can I say that? It seems that when I'm speaking Spanish, I'm taking Spanish too seriously. And then yeah, that keeps me from being kind of fluent in the language. And I really want to change that, but it's the way I started the language because I was not fully integrated with the colloquial language, talk to people, not learning all the time from about literature, about very 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 academic stuff, but real colloquial conversation with people. I think that I missed that in Spanish, but I still have a really good understanding. I think I have a C1 level, especially for my understanding and my input. But my output, I would say it's intermediate. I would say it's I intermediate because I don't really practice that much. But for my
Mm,
Brazilian Portuguese, I think I have a C1 level. Maybe I would continue just the last level, which is a C2.
mhm,
I can operate quite well in this, and I'm very keen on the Brazilian culture, the language, the dances. and everything like samba and capoeira, all these things, the food. Yeah. And I am at the U.S. embassy at the Brazilian embassy right now. At the time that I'm talking to you, this is the place where I am now. So yeah, I've been just listening, couple of people singing, dancing samba. So yeah, it's amazing. I think that um, Spanish and Portuguese, they're so interrelated that I make a lot of mistakes in Spanish, confusing the two languages because there are two separate languages
Mm-hmm.
from Roman languages, but sometimes because that there's a close relationship to the languages, sometimes I make mix them, and I think I really need to work on that by practicing the language even more. Yeah.
What kind of opportunities are there in Haiti for someone to learn Spanish, given the fact that you share an island with the Dominican Republic?
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that Spanish, Haitian folks, they are more interested in learning English
Mm,
than Spanish because English is a business language, and whenever you speak English, there's a myth about the English language. Whenever you speak English, you're gonna find opportunities here and there, and it's the right language to learn. But I think Spanish, um, we don't have a lot of, people don't really have a lot of interest in learning Spanish in Haiti. Only if you'd like to go to the Dominican Republic in order to do business. There's you can do business. You're in Haiti and you're doing business with Dominicans in the DR. But
mhm,
other than that, I don't think that there is a special, I would say, interest for Haitian folks uh, um, to learn Spanish. I don't really
mm,
think. Other than just you just want to talk to people, communicate with different people, different culture, and trying to be more open to people, understanding the diplomatic, relationship that Haiti has with the DR, because a lot
mhm,
of officials here in Haiti, the authorities, they sometimes they lie a lot. Whenever the DR president says something and they trying to change it, corrupt it, the information, and the same for DR as well. So I think it's great to learn Spanish in Haiti just to understand the relationship that Haiti has with the DR, and a lot of Haitian folks they are constantly going to the DR. I don't know why. I know, but for a lot of things that happen in Haiti, social and political upwards in Haiti. So yeah,
mm.
yeah.
So let's talk about Creole. Let's talk about
Ah,
Creole. This is
good.
why we're here. I
Yes.
think that many people who are unfamiliar with Haitian culture and
Mm-hmm.
language may see it or think of it as broken French, but it's its
Yes.
own language. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously,
Mm-hmm.
you said this earlier, spoken by millions of people, not just in Haiti, but
Mm-hmm.
around the world. Tell me
Around the
some
world.
things that separate or things that set Creole apart
Mm-hmm.
from French.
From French, I would say Haitian Creole has its own pronunciation, its own phonology, the word, the science of sounds and sound system, and the way that phonemes are articulated in order to make the language audible and understandable as well. Haitian Creole, there are a lot of sounds that you have in French that you don't really have in Haitian Creole. In Haitian Creole, for example, you have 10 vowel sounds. These 10 vowel sounds in French, you have more than 10 vowel sounds. There are a lot of vowel sounds that you have in Haitian Creole. You don't have them in French. For
Mm,
example, in French, you have the sound U, which you don't have in English. You don't have it in English. You don't have it in Spanish. You don't have it in Portuguese. You only have it in German. Okay. The sound U in French, you don't have it in Haitian Creole. Let's take an example in French. Like when you say you in French, you say tu. Tu, this sound U does not exist in Creole. And there's a tendency for Haitian folks, since it is for everyone, but in Haiti, a lot of people, they don't really have, some linguistic ground. They don't understand whenever somebody cannot pronounce a sound from a foreign language, it's because that whenever you're listening to a sound from a foreign language, you're trying to interpret it, trying to analyze it through your own mental lexicon, your own mental phonology, interior grammar, as Noam Chomsky described it. I think
mhm,
that this sound in Haiti, whenever you like you're saying "su" and here in Haiti, Haitian folks, they have a tendency to say si or tu, like in Spanish. A Spaniard would automatically say tu because this one e does not exist in Spanish.
Hmm.
So this sound does not exist in Haitian Creole, but exists in French. Some other sounds like the sound um, R in Haitian Creole, we have it in French, we have it in Haitian Creole, but it has some different phonological functions, like some different places where you have the sound. To say teacher in French, you say teacher in French, professeur, professeur, professeur. There's a R, the sound R. And in Haitian Creole, you don't have this sound. It is automatically replaced by W. But it tends to be the same thing. In Haitian Creole, you
Hmm.
say professeur, pour like a W, like woo, woo, woo in English, like water, woo.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in French, you say ho, ho. It's a guttural sound. It's in the throat. I think that's from a phonological perspective. I would say from a grammatical perspective, Haitian Creole does not have a lot of verbal flexibilities, like verbal flexions, which you have in French, in Spanish, in Portuguese, Italian. You kind of have it in German as well, and Russian, but you don't have it a lot in English. Like in French, you have to say if you're conjugating the verb to be, and in French, there are a lot of variations, from in the verb. Like I am, you are. In English, you have I am, you have you are, he, she is. But in French, each personal pronoun has its own variations from the writing, even from the sound system that you're
Right.
going to use. But in Haitian Creole, you don't have this. Like if I say I am speaking in Haitian Creole, map pale. You are speaking, ou ap pale. Ap pale, ap pale, ap pale. Just keep going. You just put the personal pronoun, I, you, he, she, we, you, they. You just change that and the same expression, the same predicate, and use the same predicate. Whereas in French, each subject has its own variation, its own form, and in Haitian Creole you have that. And after that, from lexicology, the words that we use in the language, there are a lot of words that you have in French. You have these words in Haitian Creole with different meanings, like in English. Like in English, you can have a word in American English and the British English, it means something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Right.
they have another word to say it. Like an example, truck in the American English, whereas in the British English, they say something like lorry or something like that.
Lori. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think in Haitian Creole, there are a lot of words from French, and in Haiti, they have different connotations. Not even I wouldn't say even connotation. I would say different denominations, different reality behind the word. So I think Haitian Creole has its French has participated a lot in construction that language. I can
Mm-hmm.
say Haitian Creole is the mix of French and some African languages, and once that language is part of a community, which is the Haitian community, it's no longer the French language or the African language. It's a language of its own because
Right.
different people, different way of operating in language, and different expressions that you can find in Haitian Creole, and they do not exist in the French language. But
Mm-hmm.
normally, if you speak French and people are speaking very basically like fundamental stuff, mm, like people are speaking, using words for word, like you might understand some words. But if people are speaking naturally, it's gonna be a little bit difficult to understand because the sound, yeah, the sounds, the accent, the kinetic speech, the way that words are linked together, is gonna make it a
Mm-hmm.
little bit different to understand. And
Right.
also, the Haitian Creole has its own lexicon, its own vocabulary words that that is lexicon is totally different from the French language. It's a language
Right.
of its own, as you said earlier.
Yeah. Where at all do you see or do you hear influence from African languages? And do you know any specific language spoken in Africa that has influenced Haitian Creole?
There was a language called like if you take the Swahili and Zulu, um, the way like I was talking earlier about the predicates and the subject in Haitian Creole almost have the same structure of these African languages, Zulu and Swahili. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
Hmm.
It almost have the same. verbal structure, like with these two languages in Africa, right? And there's a place in Haiti, especially called Cap Haitian. They say that in English, Cap Haitian, which is Cap Haitien here in Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
I don't live. I don't live there. But as a linguist, I'm really interested in the variation, the sociological variation of the Haitian Creole dialect spoken there. They have a lot of words, a lot of like expressions. Um, I can say they are brought from the African languages. Like for example, there is a word kanik in North Cap Haitian. This word is directly from Africa, and they still use it in this part of the country. But in Port-au-Prince, like me, I speak the Port-au-Prince Haitian Creole. I don't speak the Capua, but I can understand. Sometimes I can even understand because there are a lot of words. They have a lot of words that we don't use in Port-au-Prince Haitian Creole. But we try to understand each other like by explaining and by teaching each other like
Right.
the words. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I'm curious, how is the Creole spoken in Port-au-Prince different than the Creole spoken throughout the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the country?
Yeah. The Creole spoken in Port-au-Prince, linguists call that in French they call that Creole basilictal, like Creole basilictal. That is the Creole spoken without a lot of influences from the exterior languages, all the languages. But
Mm,
the Creole is spoken in Port-au-Prince is influenced by English, Spanish, and mostly French. Even I sometimes speaking Haitian Creole, I'm just speaking French in another way.
right.
I even do that myself. Yeah, because once you're an academic, it's really difficult to speak the sorry for the car. It's really difficult to speak the very the Creole spoken in the rural areas like the countryside. It's really difficult because you're not gonna find these variation, linguistic variation in books. Only if it's
Mm,
linguistic books, and then the capital where the capital is, so people tend to be just see the capital as a model. To me, the capital is not the one that's speaking the best, if I can say this word in this word, the best Haitian Creole. Yeah, to me it's not, because it's influenced by French a lot, by Spanish, and even English and French.
right.
Sometimes you speak in Haitian Creole in Haiti, it's like you speak in French, but using different tones, different
Mm,
intonation, but it's French. The words that you're using when you're discussing things, and then it's because that Haitian Creole is not really a language of science. Like we don't have a lot of books translated in Haitian Creole. A lot of terms that we're going to use, they're from French or English. So especially from French. So in Cap Haitian, you're gonna find people that are in the street, people that are they're not really um I'm not gonna say they're not well educated, but I would say people that don't have a high level of education. I wouldn't say education, but I don't know how to say that. But people that are not influenced by the French culture, by the American culture from an academic standpoint. These
mm,
people, they speak their Haitian Creole there's more harmony to the Haitian environment, or the Haitian culture, to the Haitian, yeah, mindset when these people are expressing themselves than in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, because Port-au-Prince, Haiti, it's kind of a melting pot. The capital of the country. You're gonna find a lot of
yeah.
people, and people are trying to. You have a lot of friends from foreigners, etc. Sometimes you spend more time with friends, with strangers, even foreigners, than your own family. So there are a lot of inferences. So I would say that Haitian Creole in Port-au-Prince is they say that here in Haiti, a Creole francisé. It's like a French Haitian Creole. Like
Mm.
a lot of words they're using are from French, a lot of expressions from French, but it's not exactly French. It's a French Haitian Creole.
I see. So would it be fair to say that someone who maybe lives in the north of Haiti
Mm-hmm.
would have a difficult time
Mm-hmm.
communicating with someone in the south of Haiti? Or I mean, is the difference that big, or is it not that big?
Oh, okay. The difference is not that big, but
Okay.
when you are like when you're observing the language as a foreigner, you see that there are a lot of differences. But when
Mm,
you're inside the country, like you're a native speaker, um, you would understand. You would understand because the difference is there are some grammatical differences. There are some phonological differences, but it's not a huge difference. For example, in the south of Haiti, in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and in the north of Haiti, Port-au-Prince is in the west.
mhm.
Um, like there are some sounds that we use in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. They don't use them in the south. They don't use them in the north. Like let's take an example. Like in the Haitian Creole, if you like to say you as an object pronoun, like you subject pronoun and you as an object pronoun, like I'm talking to you. In Haitian Creole, you use the word ooh, or if you're speaking fast, it would be ooh. Whereas when you go to the north of Haiti, they use the word, there's a kind of strange word. Myself, I really find it funny and really interesting when I'm listening to this. They use the word I, like I'm
Mm.
talking to you. If you would say that in Haitian Creole spoken in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, in the west, and in the west of Haiti, they would say "ma pale ave ou" or "ma pale ave ou." Map, map. I am talking, pale to you, a, which is the two preposition here. And this is the Haitian Creole in Port-au-Prince. Whereas when you go to the north of Haiti, they would say something like "ma pale a kill," like kill would be the substitute to whoop in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Myself, I find that very interesting. I even love this accent myself.
Yeah. That is really interesting.
Yeah.
I love to talk about these like regional
Uh-huh.
differences that we have when we speak because it all
Hmm.
comes down to communication, I think, at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm
Hmm.
always
Yeah. Yeah.
curious to know like, will people be understood if they go to a more if they leave the city and they go out to the country or they come from the country to the
Uh-huh.
city? And I
Uh-huh.
always just think it's just
Yeah.
interesting how language evolves.
Yeah. 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 And I would say that like the verbal communication is not a lot when it comes to communication. The words that we use mostly is because of like the nonverbal and the nonverbal communication is I would say it's the same in Haiti. And the verbal communication, which is part of 7% of our communication, that makes I would say that makes it even easier, like to
Mm,
understand one another. But
yeah.
other than that, I think that would have huge differences. The core message is almost the same.
Tell me how, if you know,
Hmm.
tell me what are things about Haitian Creole that make it stand out in the Caribbean, amongst other Creoles that come from French, on
Yeah.
islands like Martinique or Guadeloupe.
Okay. I would say that Haitian Creole, along with the culture, the people, and the the Haitian Creole, there are a lot of like when you go to Haiti, when it comes to Haiti, there are a lot of variation
Mm,
inside this single language. Whereas when you go to Guadeloupe, they tell me that it's not that it's not a lot of they don't really have a lot of variations. In Haitian Creole, there are a lot of variations, and the language is constantly evolving. It's constantly
mhm,
evolving with new words, new expressions, neologism, and the society is basically whenever there's something happens, a major event happen in Haiti, um, like the lockdown situation and for the coronavirus, they just
mhm.
come up with a word from English, which is loke, like from the word to lock in English, you know.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, they use this word now in Haiti, and they even use it now, not even for the lockdown. They use it whenever there's a political problem in Haiti. They say, okay, the country is going to be locked. They say, okay, like the country is going to
Mm,
get locked. Not even for the coronavirus. I think that makes it a very vivid, living language. And Haitian folks, they're all over the world, right? They're all over the world. They're not proud of their culture, or they're not. I wouldn't say that they're not proud, but they tend not to be proud of their culture when they're inside the country. Once they go out of the country, they go to the United States of America, to the Dominican Republic, to France.
mhm.
So there, the internal issue that's going to stand out, and you're going to see that they will basically embrace the language, the culture even more. And I think that for the other languages, um, there's still a predominance. For example, in the United States, there's I think in the state Louisiana, especially Baton Rouge, there's a place called Baton Rouge in Louisiana.
Hmm.
French is spoken there, but they have a Creole, which is a Louisiana Creole.
Right.
When I'm looking at this Creole, it's almost the same as French. It's almost the same as French, and there's a mix of English. To a lot of linguists, they wouldn't even call it a Creole. They would just call it a Creole in a sense that it is based on a community, but they would just call it a pidgin because it's not totally. It doesn't have its own autonomy.
Hmm.
Like in Haitian Creole, the language has its own autonomy to create words, to come up with new expressions, and to reflect our religion, belief, our reality as well. The Haitian Creole language, reflect the way Haitian people think, Haitian people interact with reality. Whereas in other countries, you tend to see that it's a mix of two different cultures, and it's a mix of two different cultures. It's not really sitting out to my knowledge.
Do
Hmm.
you think, like, have you spoken to other French Caribbean people
Yeah.
and been able to understand their Creole?
Mm-hmm. I talked last year. I talked to a woman from Martinique,
Hmm.
and she sent me. I can't remember the song. She sent me a song in Haitian Creole. It's almost the same thing, but they're using other uh, the words they use, the core message, the lexicon they use is it's almost the same as Haitian Creole, but the grammar structure, the syntax, it's not
Okay.
the same. I can't remember the
Okay.
name of the song. I can't remember the name of the song. I'm sorry, I forget the name of the song.
That's
It's a
okay.
song. Yeah, I don't remember the artist. I have this song in my house. I put it somewhere. He sent the song to me just to analyze the song, to understand it, try to see the commonality between Haitian Creole and the Creole spoken in Martinique. And at first, I couldn't understand a thing, but after listening a couple of times, I understood almost everything in the song because
Hmm.
they're using other words. But if you just following along, you would see the context. You would
Mm.
see the context of the words. But I would say that if you're talking to like someone from Martinique, you normally take a Haitian folk like he in Haiti would like to talk. I would say that it would take you like 2 days, couple of days
Okay.
just to get along. Yeah, to get along
Okay.
with the Creole spoken in Martinique. It's not that long. But
Yeah.
somebody who is very open and we wants to talk to people would take more less than 2 days.
Mm. I love that. That's so
Yeah,
cool. No, I love that.
yeah.
And I think it's, one thing that I hope to do on this show and with this show and,
Hmm.
I'm very, a part of the Caribbean. That's where my
Okay.
heritage is from. And
Yeah.
I want to highlight these languages spoken in the Caribbean,
Hmm.
because I
Hmm.
want people to understand how much history there is there, how much
Hmm.
individuality there is. And I don't think that a lot of people
Yeah.
see that.
Hmm.
A lot of people just think of it as a region and
Hmm.
probably primarily English or Spanish speaking.
Hmm.
And this is why I'm asking you these questions
Yeah,
about
yeah.
the,
It's okay.
about the Creole itself, because it's not,
Yeah, yeah.
one thing that I've really, over the past year that I've been doing this show, I've really come to
Hmm.
um, want to drill into people is like
Hmm.
Creoles are not broken, blank. It's not broken
Yeah,
French, it's
yeah.
not broken English or broken
English.
Spanish. Like
Hmm.
it's a
Yeah, yeah.
language in its own that informs
Hmm. Hmm.
people and brings communities together. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
thank you for
Yeah.
sharing all of that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
And just to finish with this one, and the problem is because of the is due to the name Creole. Like when you say a Creolist, it's basically somebody who's studying a language that is emerged from two languages putting themselves together. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people, they're just using um, uh, all these cultural baggages that they have from
Mm.
the past about the Haitian Creole. It's because of this domination. You know, words can stay the same, but the reality behind the word can change. I think what's happening with Haitian Creole in Haiti and Creole and a lot of Creoles in the world. And there's a battle in Haiti, whether to call our language Haitian, like French from France, English from English. There's a debate, a big debate in Haiti, whether to call the language Haitian Creole or Creole itself. I think in the future, myself, I have my own arguments. Maybe later I can change, or I can have more arguments and I would change my decision. But I have
Mm.
my own ideas about these, whether it's called the Haitian, the Creole, the language spoken in Haiti, Haitian, like the language of Haitian folks,
Yeah.
or Haitian Creole, just to put a Creole, just behind it. I'm very optimistic, and I hopefully we're gonna come to the right decision. But one of the things I really want to tell people is that language can change, language changes, language change, and the reality behind the language changes as well. Like in I think there's a word in Italian when you say ciao. When I was learning Italian, I'm still learning Italian, but this word ciao. When you go to the yeah to the origin of this thing of this word,
Mm.
it was chiave. Chiave, like the word that people use, people that were slaves, they use whenever they are
Mm.
greeting their masters.
Mm.
And chiave, like to be, I'm in your order, I'm in your service, whatever you want, I'm here for you. And
Mm.
the word, it changes. The words stay, I would say the same. Almost there's some morphological and phonological differences, like the way it was to be chiave, now it's ciao. But the reality behind the word changes completely. When you say somebody ciao, does that mean you are the slave of the
Mm.
person? You
Mm.
know? So that's the same for Haitian Creole. We don't really have to be like to come up with all these, all these things from the past about um, slavery and all these things. I think the word can stay the same, but the baggages, the reality behind it changes.
Yeah. How do you feel that the uniqueness of the Haitian language represents the unique qualities of the Haitian people?
Hmm. Well, that's a really great question. I would say that Haitian Creole is the language uh, through which everybody in Haiti, all Haitian folks, they can make themselves understood fully and comfortably. The Haitian Creole is the vehicle. You know, language and thought are deeply intertwined. They are deeply related. So a lot of stories, a lot of literature on whether language is not thought, whether thought is not language. So there are a lot of linguistic and philosophy of language literature on these things. So your first language, or the language that you master the most, the language that we have a lot of interaction um, in, and then you are very comfortable with, is the language through which you're going to make yourself understood, and you're going to relate deeply with people. I think Haitian Creole is the language. Although a lot of Haitian folk who does not really understand a lot about linguistics or the functionality, the importance of language, or what is language is that language is itself, they would not agree. But I think that Haitian Creole is the language that is capable of transforming the Haitianism, if I can say that word. All the yeah, yeah, that's what I would say. It's not French, it's not English, it's not Spanish. Because in order to express a lot of things, a lot of things that I can express in Haitian Creole, that I can't really express in English
Mm.
or in Spanish or in Portuguese. Although I sometimes try really hard to do that in these two languages, English and French. But I fail sometimes. But Haitian Creole is that I can, the language that I can, through which I can make myself understood, and the language that is spontaneous for Haitian folks. There is a saying in Haiti, like a cultural um, phenomenon in Haiti. Whenever you go to a country, like you see somebody is urinating. I remember that I made a video on my YouTube channel about that. Once you see the person spit, and his fee, that's one of the great clue. One of the greatest clue that the person is a Haitian. He's Haitian. Yeah, and we have that. We have some practice like that in the language itself as this culture baggage. We have that in the language itself, like things that people say, and then you're automatically gonna recognize that the person is Haitian. It's so
Really?
deep. Yeah, it's so deep. It's so spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that you would think that, oh, that person is Haitian is a Haitian, or you would say that person spent a lot of time in Haiti, more than a decade in Haiti, just to be
Mm.
able to say these things.
Man, this is so interesting because the more we're talking, I'm realizing just how unique Haitian language is and the culture
Yeah,
is. Like it really is one of those cultures and languages that like where else are you going to find this? Like
yeah,
in Haiti.
yeah.
or
Right.
or maybe in a Haitian community outside of
Mhm.
Haiti, but
Oh, Haiti. Yeah,
it's so distinct and so
yeah,
uniquely shaped by history. So I know you have a YouTube channel,
yeah, yeah.
and I want you to tell us all about it and how you hope to reach people and tell people about language learning and tell us where we can find you on YouTube.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. On YouTube, I was inspired by one of my, I can say one of my mentor, teacher. His name is Richard Simcott. You might know about him. I think he's my role model when it comes to language learning.
Mhm.
He's British. This guy is my inspiration when it comes to language learning. He has a YouTube channel. I think his name Richard Simcott.
Mhm.
And one day said that if you're really interested about languages, you can, and then you're a polyglot and you're really interested about teaching languages or something about linguistic stuff, so that you can create a YouTube channel or you can create, a media like something on social media, Facebook, like a podcast, something like that, in order to, to spread the message, to talk to people, to have an interview, to learn from other people.
Mhm.
And in 2020, last year, I started a YouTube channel called Self-Taught Polyglot. My initial intention was to teach Haitian Creole in English because a lot of Haitian folks here in Haiti, they know that I speak English. Although I'm not, I speak English, but I'm not perfect. Everybody not, but I'm seriously not. Yeah, yeah. You're seriously way better than I am. So my initial intention was to teach Haitian Creole in English. And I started this YouTube channel called Self-Taught Polyglot. I remember my first video I did was in April 2020, where I introduced the YouTube channel. I said my name, and I was with a Brazilian friend of a friend and a Mexican friend. They presented themselves, and we talk about the YouTube channel. Um, I wanted to teach Haitian Creole in English, and I realized that I could talk about language learning in general and teach languages. And I kind of swap. I kind of changed talking about language learning. And I see that I'm not that big in this community when it comes to language learning. And I said, okay, let me get back to teaching languages like Haitian Creole and English. And then this is what I'm doing right now. I'm basically talking about language learning just a little bit, but mostly teaching languages, English and Haitian Creole primarily.
Mhm.
So on YouTube, if you go to YouTube, I also have a Instagram page called Self Taught Polyglot. You're gonna see on YouTube as well this YouTube channel called Self Taught Polyglot, and I have over 75 videos there. I have a lot of videos. I have videos of 1 hour, but these are not about languages. There were lives. I used to do some lives, at the time of the coronavirus on Facebook. A lot of friends they were demanding me that, and I had an agenda. So can I do some lives talking about life in general? Sometimes I use English. Sometimes I use Haitian Creole. Sometimes I use French. All the time I use Portuguese. Like talking about life, things that are really
Ah.
interesting. And I say and I just publish them on YouTube. Now I wouldn't, but I publish them in my YouTube channel. So yeah, now if somebody goes to my YouTube channel, you're gonna see that there are over like 1 hour on my YouTube channel, just talking about stuff that are not about language learning, but about life in general. But on
Oh,
my YouTube
wow.
channel, I have videos about Haitian Creole. I have some playlists, Easy Haitian Creole, where I teach Haitian Creole from the street. It's basically a project that I started, trying to emulate effectively the YouTube channel Easy Languages. You might have heard about this YouTube channel.
Mm,
No, Easy
yeah.
Languages. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to imitate them in a way. Doing some interviews in the street and talking to people in Haitian Creole, and then publish, from 3 to 10 minutes videos talking about the Haitian culture, the Haitian language, things that happen in Haiti, you know, everything Haitian Creole or
Yeah.
everything Haitian. So I put this playlist on my YouTube channel, set for Polyglot, where I began, I think in last month, I began to publish videos about Haitian Creole in the street. But I have a lot of recommendations. People, they told me that I am supposed to put the subtitles, the English, like for people to see, those who don't really have a good understanding of the Haitian Creole to be able to understand
Hmm.
what people are saying whenever I ask a question in the street.
That sounds good. And I'm going to put your links in the show notes of this episode so
All
that
right.
people who
Thank
want to
you.
get in touch will be able to click and just find you and find your channel and learn some Haitian Creole for themselves.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so
Of
much.
course, of
All
course.
right.
So
Yeah.
I have one more question for you, but I first want to say thank you so much for having this conversation with me and for teaching me so much about Creole, Haitian Creole and Haitian culture. And I really, really enjoyed talking with you
Mhm.
and learning so much. I have a lot of reading to do, I think, just to educate myself on some of the things that you said. I always like to do that because, that's what you're supposed to do, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you, and I hope that in the future that I can bring more videos on my YouTube channel. That will make it easier for you just to dive into and to learn more about um um our language, culture, etc. So thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
I hope so too, and you're most welcome. It's been a pleasure. I like to end each episode on the same question, and that is,
Mhm.
do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters,
Mhm.
slang words, idioms, words of
Mhm.
wisdom, or words of advice in Haitian
Mhm.
Creole to share?
Yeah, I have a lot. I have a lot. Let me just pick one. Yeah. Okay, two just come out in my mind. There's a saying in Haitian people say, uh, goes by Creole parler, Creole comprendre. Creole parler, Creole parler, Creole comprendre. Like Haitian Creole is spoken, Haitian Creole is understood. It's like whenever you're somewhere and you're talking to a bunch of people, and
Hmm.
then you say Creole parler, Creole comprendre. It's like what you said it in Haitian Creole, and everybody here Haitians, they're supposed to understand it. They're not going to
Mm.
complain later. So you say in Haitian Creole, Creole parler, Creole comprendre. En français, in French, you say à bon entendeur, salut. Like when you say something, you're not going to get back on it. You suppose that everybody understands it.
Hmm.
Yeah, but
So
what's
so
what's really
it's
interesting about it is that they use the word Creole in it.
okay. So let me try it. It's say it one more time.
Creole parler,
Creole parler,
uh-huh. Creole comprendre,
Creole comprend,
comprendre.
comprend.
Yeah, très bien.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah, you're not going. You say Creole parler, Creole comprendre. So what they said is said. Everybody understands. You're not going to get back on it. Don't complain later. Yeah.
That's a good
And there's
one.
another one. Yeah, there's another
Hmm.
one which I think it resonates with English, uh, which is in Haitian Creole. Remets tout, perdis tout, which in English is grabs all, lose all, or jacket of all is the master of none.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. In Haitian Creole, you say remets tout, perdis tout. Like remets is to love, to like. Tout is all.
Hmm.
Perdis c'est to lose. Tout c'est all. So when you love everything, you lose everything. Basically, literally, the translation.
When you love everything, you lose
Lose
everything.
everything. Yeah.
Let me try this one. Say it again, and I will repeat after you.
Uh-huh. Good. Remets tout.
Remets tout,
Uh-huh. Perdis tout.
perdis tout.
Yeah. Remets is a verb to love.
Hmm.
Perdis is a verb to lose.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No, I like that one a lot. I like that
Yeah.
one.
That's resonate with English speaking folks.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah.
Really quickly, before I let you go, don't
Hmm.
think about this too hard. Just the first thing that comes to mind. After
Hmm.
you've been having a conversation with someone for all this time, what is
Hmm.
the best way to say goodbye in Creole?
Okay, you can say in Haitian Creole. Oh yeah, I would say um you say bye bye also. Yeah, you say bye bye. Yeah, it's a word. It's a calc like from English, but we use it a lot. But you can
Hmm.
say Mali, Mali, Mali. It's the most natural way to say it. Mali, I'm gone.
Malay.
Mali, yeah, Mali,
Ah. Malay, Valentino.
Mali, yeah, Mali Valentino. Vikito, I leave you. Bye bye.
I'll be talking to you soon.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.